Hi, everyone. Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We're the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who always remembers birthdays, my sister, Meredith. How's it going, Mare?
Great. That's not true.
You forget birthdays. You don't.
I do forget birthdays all the time. And famously, the last birthday of my good friend Sarah, I thought was the 27th, and I was waiting for the 27th. And I was just like, here it comes. Everybody, don't forget it's her birthday on the 27th. Her birthday is the 24th.
That's not even really, that's like 3 days away. That's not even close.
I know. And everyone reminded me of it. So.
All right. Well, we're going to kick off this episode talking about some folks who also forget birthdays, apparently. So we have just finished Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. I think we won't bury the lead here, I think a very delightful book. Excellent children's book. But it was kind of missing something, don't you think, Mare?
I don't know.
You don't think it was missing anything?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll?
Yes, exactly. Which can be summed up.
Where you were going.
Can be summed up in the person of Tigger. There's no Tigger in this book, Mare.
Oh.
Probably like the most famous Disney character of the Pooh bunch. He doesn't show up until the sequel, House at Pooh Corner, which, if this podcast is still around in 2 years, we can do.
Well, it's already been 2. 1, 2?
It's almost 2. We're coming up on our second
2.
anniversary. Yeah, it's almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you're excited for some hot, bouncy Tigger content, you got to wait 2 years. Stick with us. Come 2024, we will do House at Pooh Corner, I promise. And then we'll get some actual Tigger action.
That sounds like a weird hashtag.
Hot Tigger action.
Hot bouncy Tigger action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so...
Fun.
Exactly, fun. So we have finished the book, a wonderful book written by Mr. A.A. Milne, who apparently was quite well known prior to writing this book. He was a playwright and author, and I guess of some renown, but then wrote this little book, and this sort of completely overshadowed his legacy and became what he's known for.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't look into him past this. I'm glad you did.
I did I read the Wikipedia page, so the amount of research that I did was pretty
well, it makes a lot of
minimal.
sense. He's got a really good back and forth. He's got great dialogue. He does he does this wonderful job of fourth wall breaking that feels real. It feels natural. It reminds me of, a formative book or movie. Like the first time I really experienced fourth wall break was in Princess Bride, when it's like the frame of the grandfather reading to the kid, and then you're in the story, and then coming in and out of that. I remember that as a kid. But anyway, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think it feels natural too, because he's writing it for his son, Christopher Robin Milne. So Christopher Robin, is his actual child, his only child, as a matter of fact. And I guess he grows up and becomes a book publisher, which I guess, kind of makes sense. He's into literature. That is not what Ian McGregor did in the movie, by the way. Just want to point that out. He like sold luggage or something like that.
Isn't it Ewan McGregor?
Ewan, I don't know however you say it. Yes.
It's not Ian. That's what you meant.
Young Obi-Wan. I like prefer to refer to him as. Yeah. But anyway, so we've read this book, which, as you kind of mentioned, starting off, it's written as truly a father telling stories to his son, which literally what it was. I mean, he apparently wrote this, to entertain his child, and used the stuffed animals that his son played with and created stories around them and made them into characters. And as we go through, this very short book, it's only 10 chapters, sort of it organically builds, which I really appreciated. We got to meet the characters almost individually, right? I mean, we started off
pretty close.
Pooh and Christopher Robin were in the first chapter, and then we sprinkle in Rabbit, and we sprinkle in Piglet and Owl. Eventually, we very strangely introduce Kanga and Roo. Eeyore shows up in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so by the end, when you get to the party chapters, or the party chapter, the expedition chapter, then we got the whole crew. So we've sort of built this world slowly as we've gone. So I really like that sort of aspect about the book.
Yeah, and having met all of these characters, I mean, you had these books. There's pictures on Instagram of Kyle's original books, but this was not one that I remember choosing to have Dad read to us. Which, early on in the podcast, you'll know that our dad used to read to us is one of the reasons why we're readers and read to our kids. And there's some lovely stuff that we have with our dad if you go back in the archives. Anyway, but I didn't pick this book, but I remember seeing them all the time. And I wonder why I didn't pick it. Maybe because it was too Disney-fied, and I'm like, oh, I know that one. Why would I pick that book? Or I don't know.
Well, I think they felt strange because we had all of them, right? So we had
Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh, House of Pooh Corner.
Which is the last one. I think it's the last one.
No, it's the next one. It's the sequel. And then we had When We Were Young and Now We Are 6.
Yeah, I thought those came in between, and then House of Pooh Corner was the sequel, but it was like, oh well.
Did they? We can look at publication order. But I think for me, just my remembrance of it is, you're right, once I was old enough to realize what things were and I could read myself, I was so familiar, I think, with the Disney version of Pooh and all the Disney books and Disney shows and cartoons that, Disney's had the rights to Pooh since the 1950s, and they've been making things. That when I would pick up these other hardcover books, and they were, the copies we had were sort of fabric-y covered.
Yeah.
They were the fabric-covered hardcover books, and they were sort of frayed. They looked old. They smelled old, which now I think is wonderful, but back then as a kid, I found a little off-putting. And the illustrations are just, simple pencil sketches. There's nothing fancy about them.
It doesn't look like Disney at all.
Not at all. And 2 of the books are just collections of poetry. So I really, as a kid, I don't think I quite knew what to make of these.
One's printed upside down, backwards, or
right.
upside down, or both.
Yeah,
or
our copy, the cover's on wrong, and it's just. So I always found them to be very just sort of strange. Like, why do I have these? I think what it reminds me of, we got from, I think they were originally our Uncle Christopher's.
Oh.
These large, probably 1 to 2 inch thick, from the 1960s, like Disney collection of just stories.
Oh.
They're hardcover. There was like one was like stories around the world. One was like adventures, and they were basically like simple novelizations of all the Disney TV shows of like the 50s and 60s, like Davy Crockett and all that kind of stuff. One was, I think, actual like Disney, like the Disney movies. Like Cinderella's in there, Sleeping Beauty's in there. Very simplified. And then there's one other one that's just sort of like fantastical stories or something. I forget exactly. But they're very 1960s, so they're like extremely wordy. I mean, I've tried to read them to the kids, but they are just, it's just
you have them.
I have them, yeah. They're just walls of text, and they're not welcoming books. And they just feel, even as a child in the 80s, picking these books up, I could feel like they were from another world. right?
Weird.
They didn't belong. They were from a different era. These are not the kind of books that I wanted to read. And I think having the Pooh books lumped in there really was the same kind of thing. Like these are not, there's something off about this. There's not right. These are not mine really, even though they were.
Huh. They were Uncle Chris's, you think?
These large Disney collections were, yeah. The Pooh books were mine.
Yeah, I know that about Pooh.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I can't picture them.
They are, I don't know, yay big. They're rather large books. Gray covers, and then the spine of each is a different color. Like one is yellow, one's orange, one's blue, one's purple.
Clearly
maybe.
printed by publishers who were like, we're just printing books, and then we're not. I mean, focused on children and their attention span and being
I'm not
read
sure
aloud.
these might be
to.
printed like by some Disney imprint, like some Disney publishing, I think.
But the way you describe them, like that's not. It sounds like an adult collector thing versus like this is printed for a child.
I don't know. I will. I'll find them and we'll post some pictures online, so you can take a look at what these books are. But anyway, but that's what I associated the Pooh books with. I felt like they were, of a piece with those, and so they never attracted me as a kid. So getting to read this now, as an adult, I thought this was great.
Yeah, I did too, and I recommended it to my friend and colleague who I already mentioned, Sarah, who has a young son, and I was like, I feel like this has this real subtle depth. Like there's nothing in here that is like aiming to moralize or be more than what it is, and yet as an adult reading it, it just feels like, I don't know, I just the love that the animals have for Christopher Robin and their trust in him feels more than just a kid who's like, well, I'm like the boss and I boss around my animals and I'm in charge, and that's fun to pretend I'm in charge. He seems like a very benevolent child overseer or whatever you want to call him. Like when they freaking kidnap Rue, Kanga's like, well, she was afraid at first, but then knew Christopher Robin wouldn't let anything bad happen to Rue, and so she was fine. And then abuses Piglet in turn. But I just thought it was really lovely the way A.A. Milne, maybe that's what it is, honestly, the way A.A. Milne characterizes his own son fictionally for his son. If you're thinking like these are stories he actually told to him or wrote down for him. And so he's like almost holding up a mirror for his own son to see what he sees in his son or hopes to see in his son. This wonderful little human that these other creatures look to and always can figure out the answers and they feel safe with. It's really beautiful looking at it as a parent, as an adult.
I wonder too, because Christopher Robin is an only child, the real Christopher Robin. He's not fighting with his brother or sister. There's no competition in the house. It's just he's a quiet British child, just calmly playing with his animals and acting out, going to tea and whatever else. I wake up in the morning and immediately there's some space battle going out in the hallway, and then in the afternoon there's wrestling and they're just killing each other, and I'm just it's not quite the same vibe as I think a quiet simple only child just sitting and reading and playing with his things. It's kind of like the idyllicness that my life was for a few years. It was
right,
quiet and beautiful and sort of perfect. Yeah, it was nice.
Would you describe the first 7 years of your life as idyllic more than once? Idyllic.
Yeah,
and then
I think so.
Mom and Dad accidentally had me.
Had another one.
Got exponentially better for most people.
Oh, It changed, that's for certain. I don't know if I appreciated it as a child, but it definitely was different.
There was something in mom and dad that was like, you know what? This one seems like he's probably not going to take care of us when we're old. We should probably have another one just for like securities. Like,
Gotta hedge your bets a little bit.
self-interest.
That's why people had, 10 to 15 kids back in the past.
Dude, I think about people in my life who I know who don't have any children, meaning like they're old. Not old.
Right.
They're much older than me. They could be my parents and they don't have any kids. And I'm like, who's going to take care of you? Do you have brothers? Do you have sisters?
Yeah.
Have you written something? There's a lawyer who's going to execute what you want. Like who? And I'm sure there's an answer. And you don't have to have kids and you should not have kids if you don't want them, for sure. But like, what happens then? And maybe that's unfair that it goes to the children. I don't know.
Well, I think this goes into the larger, and maybe can tie this in with the theme of Winnie the Pooh, right? Like humanity is built for relationships. Like we're not meant to just be alone. Like we are meant to be in relationship with other humans. So be it your children or friends or whatever, what have you. Somebody should care when you die. Somebody should take care of you. I'm getting a little morbid here, but I think that's sort of a message or a thing you could pull out of Winnie the Pooh is even though Christopher Robin is his only child, he is built to have relationships, and so he builds that not only with himself, right, but in and amongst his characters. Yeah. Because it's not as though Christopher Robin is the central character in this book.
No, hardly.
He just sort of appears here and there. And Winnie the Pooh, I guess for the most part is, but there's chapters where Pooh is, again, just sort of there. It's chapters that focus on the other characters. And I think in reading this, you really get a nice sense of who they all are. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, it's only 10 chapters, very short book, but you really, I pointed out last week in the Piglet Surrounded by Water, chapter 9, where he kind of goes through and says, well, all these other characters will be fine because of X, Y, and Z, explaining their personalities, and, Pooh's dumb, but it works out. And Kanga's going to freak out and be anxious about Roo, and because of that, we'll do the right thing. And, Owl can fly. He's smart. He's smart. And Rabbit is cunning, and he'll scheme his way out of it. And Eeyore just won't care, because he's like, whatever. So
thank goodness I can drown in my own sorrow. And
exactly. So you really get I think, very concisely and very quickly get a very good sense of all of these characters and who they are. Maybe I haven't watched the Disney Pooh recently enough to see if they really characterize them, but, going into this, I sort of pictured almost all of them as anxious, if that makes sense. Like, the Disney version of Rabbit is sort of a fussy little guy living by,
kind of a jerk.
He's having a fussy bachelor, doing his own thing. But in here, he's really more just a cunning, and not, cunning, but, he runs this, he has this huge family.
Yeah, you don't see the family, the friends and relations constantly there'd be a lot to animate.
It would. But, Rabbit is, I think, a little more fleshed out than what I had in, my picture from the Disney. And
he's a bit xenophobic at first.
Yeah, it's true. This is true.
With Kanga and Roo until he meets Roo.
And then he's like, this is fun. He's cool.
Yeah.
And even Eeyore, I think. Yeah, and then even Eeyore, like, he has moments of joy. Like, he finds his tail and he skips around, and when it's his birthday and he gets the jar and the balloon, he's very content playing with it.
Love that part.
Yeah,
I think that was my favorite
very
part.
sweet.
And I think what Eeyore was trying to do is make everybody else feel better about their crappy gifts. He was like, but look,
Do you
it
think?
goes in
You don't think he
and it
genuinely
goes
was
out.
just tickled by it?
I don't know.
I think he
I don't
genuinely
know.
was like, I got a present, man. Like, he didn't care. Like, he just wanted somebody to acknowledge it was his birthday. And he got two
Maybe
presents.
it was a little bit of both. It's like I got presents, I like them, and now I'm going to show you. Piglet, it goes in, it goes
Mm.
out. Like I put the balloon in, I put the balloon out. The damp rag, like
Right, exactly.
I was made of. But that was one of the parts where I liked Eeyore the most. And when I was a teen and a young person, I was like, Eeyore's my favorite because I'm goth and depressed.
Uh,
Eeyore was not my favorite in this. I was actually more like, ooh, Eeyore is, I don't know what he is. Like the
he's a
whole,
kind of a down. I mean, he's a downer. Like, he's not.
well, not just for me, not just that he was a downer, but that like he was like, I'm gonna take this over, and this is about me now. And Rue, be quiet, and I'm gonna make this speech.
Yeah.
That part threw me off, and then it was funny, but the like, don't you see all the presents? Look at all the
Yeah.
cake and the sugar. And I was like, it's a little thick, Eeyore. Little thick. We get it. Everyone forgot. What are you trying to do now? Like, did you tell anyone your birth? Anyway, I came across someone who wrote their like senior thesis on the psychological disorders of all the characters in Pooh.
Oh, man.
And it was a little thin, but it was like
Right.
a not a grad thesis. It was an undergrad, so it was good effort.
They
It
were
was
trying.
interesting to scan, and she was basically Eeyore has some version of that's more mild than like uh you know depressive, manic depressive or depressive disorder. Something more mild, which I'm not sure of the name, but I liked her. I'm assuming it's a her. I don't actually know, but that person's diagnosis of each of the characters and her justification for whatever was wrong with Pooh is because Christopher Robin bumps his head down the stairs all the time. So he's messed up.
It's a little forgetful. He's got some amnesia, looking concussed all the time. I can understand that.
It was good.
So I think overall, really good book. Just a couple other, minor notes. I don't know if you have any other points you want to bring up about. Again, this is a short book. We have two pretty detailed discussions on them. But anything that we didn't discuss already that you wanted to kind of highlight? I have two things yet that I just want to kind of mention.
Well, I think one of them that you're going to mention is the map. Is that
Yeah, I want to talk about the map a little bit.
okay? Because one of the things I want to talk about is in the map that I'm looking at.
Okay.
But
All right, so we'll check that out here in a sec.
that's it for me.
Okay. So one thing that I'd meant to bring up in our previous wraps or previous discussion episodes is Eeyore's always one of his expressions he says is, "Here we go gathering nuts and May,"
Yeah.
which I did not know, but it's not nuts and May as Eeyore says. It's here we go gathering nuts in May. Really.
Well, that makes more sense, but
A
it's
little
not
bit more
printed
sense.
as
Right. It's printed as nuts
printed
and
as
May.
and.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's maybe that's the British version, but we Americans, it's here we go around the mulberry bush.
Oh, well, they
That's
say
all
that
it
too
is.
at some point, right?
Yeah.
Because
I don't think so. They just here we go
they say the
gathering
mulberry
nuts in
bush.
May. What do they?
Yeah, at one
don't
point
remember.
because he's one of them is like a witch mulberry bush. Where? I'm pretty sure. Hold on, I can find it.
Oh, can you?
Mulberry. Yeah. So he says, "Good morning, Pooh Bear," said Eeyore gloomily. "If it is a good morning, which I doubt. But what's the matter?" "Nothing, Pooh Bear, nothing. We can't all, and some of us don't. And that's all there is to
You're
it."
right.
"We can't all what?" said Pooh, rubbing his nose. "Gaiety." Song and dance. Here we go round the mulberry bush.
You are correct.
Oh, said Pooh. He thought for a long time. Then he asked, what mulberry bush is that? And that's it.
Yeah.
And then we go into the bonhomie, French word meaning bonhomie.
Yep. Yeah, but then in the very next line, he says, that's right, sing, tiddly too. Here we go gathering nuts in May.
Yeah.
So, very interesting. It's the same song, or the same tune anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
Here we go around
gathering
the
nuts in May, nuts in May.
The mulberry bush. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess maybe they both know it. I was not familiar with nuts in May.
Are mulberries real?
Sure. I don't know.
Mulberry trees. They're not even real, bushes. Right? They're trees. What's so special about a mulberry tree?
You make mulberry wine, don't you?
Mulberry wine.
Isn't it a thing?
No, that's strawberry wine. Mulberry wood is fairly durable and rot resistant. It's often used to make lathe-turned bowls that have beautiful yellow hue. Mulberry trees grow fast and aren't too picky about the soil they inhabit. One species is native to North America. Interesting.
Very nice. Okay.
But why bush? Mulberry bush. If it's a tree.
I mean, tree and bush are the same. You can put both of them into the song. Yeah, here we go around the mulberry tree, mulberry tree, mulberry tree. That's interesting.
Here we go around the mulberry bush is an English nursery rhyme and singing game. It's all the same tune is also used for Lazy Mary, Will You Get Up? And Nuts in May.
Okay.
And a variant is used for Wheels on the Bus, which I sing every day.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
The baby's so into Wheels on the Bus. Anyway.
Okay. Well,
my gosh, there's so many verses to Mulberry Bush.
Are there?
Yeah. Here we go round on a cold and frosty morning. This is the way we wash our face.
Oh, yeah, because it's because it's like a...
It's the way we comb our hair, brush our teeth,
right.
put our clothes on.
That. I did know that. It's like a song and dance to help kids get ready in the morning.
But what's the deal with the mulberry bush?
Now, I mean, so nowadays, the modern version, we just put a podcast on. Do you guys do chompers?
No, what's chompers?
It's a toothbrushing podcast. It's your morning and night toothbrushing show. It's a 3-minute podcast, comes out morning and night. You throw it on, kid brushes his teeth.
What do they talk about?
Anything. All kinds of
weirdo
things.
Bonkers.
It's just everything. There'll be jokes week, science week, history week, whatever. It's all kind of stuff. Anyway, not that we need to shout out any big podcasts or anything. They're bigger than us.
I don't know about other parents, but Sesame Street did a song like, wash your hands, wash, washy, wash, wash, washy, wash. And then you can also do it for brush your teeth. It's much more modern, very catchy. So we sing that. It's a little...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think Sesame... Well, I won't get on Sesame Street, but...
You can get down.
I think they do it a little too much for the parents. I don't know.
Maybe, but also that's all the baby watches. Well, we've gotten her into Tumbleleaf on Amazon Prime, which is a very calm, wonderful show.
Yeah, my kids are already too old for that. Back when we had
they were watching it here.
Oh, were they? Okay.
Yeah, Simon was like zoned.
You have the television on; they'll watch whatever. That's kind of the screen.
Well, we learned that from our cousins. That's what happens when you have children who are sheltered and homeschooled and don't have TV.
It's also new because when, nowadays, I guess with streaming, you don't really care, but that was always the thing. Like when we went to our grandmother's house, like she had different channels than us and the shows came on at different times. And it was, anyway, there was different shows that I hadn't seen before. All right. So the second thing, the other thing I just kind of want to talk about is the map a little bit, because this kind of blew my mind a little bit because I had always thought that these characters lived in the 100-acre wood, but well, actually, canonically, they don't live they live around the 100-acre wood. The 100-acre wood is just a thing in their world.
That's where Owl lives.
Yes.
Just Owl.
Yes. So, if you are watching us on Twitch or you're watching us on YouTube, I'm going to show you this map here. So this map, back in 2018, the original map drawing sold for 430,000 British pounds. That's a lot. That's a lot of pounds. Mr. Shepherd helped. Yeah. So if we look at this map here, the 100-acre wood is really just this portion in the center, right? Where Owl lives. Because I assume so, hence the name. But if you look, everyone else lives outside of it. You got Christopher Robin has his house on the one side. Eeyore's got his gloomy place in the corner. You've got where the Woozles are. You've got Piglet's house. You got Pooh's house. Oh, it wasn't. I'm sorry. You are correct. You are correct. You have Rabbit's house. His friends and relations live on the other side of the river there. There's the bee tree. So yeah, the 100-acre wood is just one element of the world here. I found that kind of fascinating. Yeah, they might just say, "Oh, everybody lives on 100-acre wood." It's Winnie the Pooh and the friends of the 100-acre wood. But no, the 100-acre wood is a separate thing. Because that's where they hunted it, right? Well, you can't prove a negative, right? That'd be literally every location, right? Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 All right. Awesome. Well, I just like showing the map because any book that has a map in the front, that's already, you can notch it up 2 points higher in my book because then it gives you something to look at and something to do while you're flipping through the chapters.
The other day, and I didn't know the answer. Were you a Lord of the Rings reader? Did we have those books at home?
No.
Or did we not?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's not my fault.
So I did have them.
You did?
I did. I had editions that were printed in the early 80s, I want to say. I'd have to go back and look exactly when they were printed, but I did have copies of them. I never read them, however.
Really?
I watched the cartoon versions that were done. Both the creepy Ralph Bakshi version as well as what was the other? I forget the other animation studio that did The Hobbit. So I knew the story. I did not read them until like 2002, I want to say. Yeah. I think the first movie had just come out or was about to come out, which we just hit the 20th anniversary. And I think that was the first time I actually sat down and read them, I believe.
Why is that?
I could be mistaken. So we just watched the we just watched Fellowship of the Ring. It took us three days, I think, to get through the extended edition of Fellowship. And, Ellen was very adamant that she didn't want to watch the movie. She had to read the book first, because she was always read the book first. And I said, honey, with this one, you just got to trust me.
This one's it's okay, yeah.
I think it's okay to watch the movie first, because the books are just so slow and detailed.
They're dense.
They are. Like, they don't get out of the Shire for the first 100 pages. Like, we have 15 or 20 pages just on, like, hobbits and what they do, and, they smoke this leaf and not that leaf, and, these hobbits over here, like, this kind of, and you're just like, oh, my dude, can we move on? Like,
there's a lot of walking.
There's a lot
of walking.
There's a lot in there. And I said, you're welcome to read the books, but I think you will have something to hang the books on if you watch the movies first, because the Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson trilogy are mostly excellent. I have a few quibbles with Two Towers and a little bit with The Return of the King. It drags a little bit, but at least Fellowship is near perfect. There's there's some understandable changes, sure. But he doesn't like break anything. I think once we get into the very end, and now we're turning into a Lord of the Rings podcast, we get to the very end of Two Towers, and he in my eyes irrevocably. Yeah, it's an egregious destruction of a few characters that, anyway.
Regardless.
Irregardless, they're still good, it's very, very good movies, worth watching.
No,
they're still A+.
I agree, and a lot of readers, real readers, became readers because of those books, or there are Tolkien, like, hardcore fans. And I thought to myself, knowing that, like, I didn't read it, but I knew that you had, like, Aragon, right? Aragon, the dragon book?
Yeah, I read those, I read those.
Yeah,
those
I think
cute.
I saw those on the shelf or whatever. I wasn't a fantasy reader or a sci-fi reader, but I thought that you were, and I thought, we didn't have these in the house that I remember. Yeah. Nobody read them out loud to me. Nobody told me to read them. And I didn't meet them until 2013 when I got a job at the company that I work at. And Fellowship, well, the first half was one of the books that we read with our older students.
Okay.
And I really liked it. But we had to help the kids through the walking and the hobbits. And I love that stuff. Anyway, I was curious as to why that wasn't in my orbit, but now I know.
So I did not read fantasy growing up. It was not a thing I was into.
I always put sci-fi fantasy together.
They're
not the same.
They're not the same thing. I was very much into sci-fi, and I so Tolkien is, the godfather of like, he's created everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, things that you just take for granted. So, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I played fantasy video games growing up. But all that stuff, all those tropes, dwarves are short and they dig for gold, elves are beautiful and tall and live in the woods. Like, he created all of that. Like, that didn't exist prior to him. Dwarves have beards and they do this and they're hardy and stocky. The stuff, the standard.
Men look just like the women.
Right, yeah, exactly. the standard, the standard Dungeons and Dragons fantasy tropes all came from him. But I was not into that stuff. When I was in my first assignment in the Army in Korea, I was a single guy, just time to kill. There wasn't a whole lot of, work was not like super strenuous at that time. I would just go to the PX on the weekends for something to do and just buy stuff. You just buy DVDs and books and whatnot. And that's when I got into fantasy. I started reading David Eddings. I read The Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan. So I started to get into that stuff then. And, then when I got back to the States, I had a friend who was very into Lord of the Rings, and the movies were just coming out. And so, he wanted to go see the movies, and so I was like, oh, I've actually never read the book. So I had those copies, though. I had those paperback copies since who knows when. I don't even know when I got them. So then I went and I read them, and I was like, oh, these are actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
You read all of The Wheel of Time?
So when I started, I read up to whatever was out at the time, was like book 8, I want to say. I think eventually there was a 9th and maybe a 10th after Robert Jordan died. So I never finished what was out there. And I always said I wanted to go back and read them, and I just never did. And now there's an Amazon Prime series, and everybody says, oh, it's like the cool thing. I'm like, whatever, I don't want to read them anymore.
Now they're too cool.
Now they're too cool, right? I read those way back when. Anyway.
My aforementioned friend, who I've mentioned twice this podcast, and I don't think ever before, she just did she's like, I'm going to take on The Wheel of Time. I'm going to read them. And I think her story was her husband was like, are you sure you want to do that?
So they're kind of cliche, and they're kind of like...
Are they cliche because...
The first book's very cliche. Like, if you read Eye of the World...
cliche because... Did they make the cliche?
No. If you read Eye of the World, the first book is rough. It's a little rough. Like, there's a lot of eye-rolling stuff that you're like, okay, whatever, dude. Like, a lot of stuff that he's cribbing from other things, and you're just like, all right, whatever. It becomes its own thing, by the second and third book and whatever, and kind of goes on. But it's too long, and
I'll have to ask her.
I don't know if he really had a plan and could have. I don't know if he ever really was going to stick the landing. I think he didn't know how to.
Martin.
Exactly. I don't think he knew how to wrap it up. Yeah, I don't think he knew how to wrap it up. He didn't have an ending in mind, so he just kept going and going and going, and it gets They get super repetitive. Like, sort of the same things happen over and over and over, and you're like, oh my goodness, can we not? Anyway.
Interesting.
Now that we've completely gone off on Winnie the Pooh here.
Jumped the shark. Hold on, we'll get back to Winnie the Pooh. Well,
it's a wrap episode, whatever.
It's one thing to have a book that's cliche because everything came after it. Like you said about Tolkien.
Sure.
Like, this is what else. I remember we used to teach Treasure Island, and the kids would be like, oh, God, we know what pirates are like. This is what... And we're like, no, this is why you know that.
Exactly.
Because of Treasure Island.
Exactly. So
if you're the first, and then they were like, oh.
Yeah. So if you're a kid who like consumes a lot of fantasy, and plays Dungeons and Dragons and does all this stuff, and then you go back and you read Tolkien for the first time, I think you would kind of be like, oh, whatever. You kind of roll your eyes a little bit. But that's where it all came from. Yeah. Anyway, it's really... It's incredible. And the depth that he built, like, he was a linguist who just wanted to make up languages and wrote a book with the world just to kind of justify, just so he could, justify these languages.
All this because we're talking about books with maps in the beginning, right?
Exactly. That's kind of where we started from. So anyway, 100 Acre Wood is not where they live. It is part of the book. All right. So
not in Middle Earth either.
Exactly, yeah, only Middle Earth. So now that we've completely gone off the rails on Winnie the Pooh, anything else on Winnie the Pooh that we want to? Do we stay awake or do we sleep through this one?
Oh, I stayed awake and I really liked it. I really did.
I physically fell asleep a few times, but overall I stayed awake. That's what I get for reading late at night. But yes, it was quite good. I quite enjoyed.
Good.
All right, so. Do you want to reveal our next book? I do not know what it is.
I know you don't, and I wasn't sure I was going to pick this one.
Okay.
And we've thrown it around before.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like I need this book right now because that's how much I like it.
All right.
And the rules are that you can't say no, right? You can't say no to this if I announce like it is the next book.
Yeah, it'll be a little strange if you're the only one reading it. Yeah, it'll make me hosting the next discussion episode pretty awkward if I haven't read the book.
We're gonna read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Ah, okay.
And I already started reading it on my own, and it is just filling a void in my soul because it is so good.
Really?
And it's like gonna be like the third or fourth time that I've read it.
So I've never read it. I've read like those illustrated classics version of it.
Never read it.
Yeah, we can discuss. I mean, if we want to talk, I've heard it's not good, so I'll be interested. I'm curious to read it.
From whom did you hear such an absurd?
Wasn't she like 19 when she wrote it or something? Like I've heard it's you can tell a 19-year-old
Age
wrote it.
shame?
No, I'm just saying, like, it's... Look, you mentioned Aragon earlier, right? The kid, Christopher Paolini, wrote it when he was, like... He started when he was, like, 12 or 13 or 14 or something,
really?
and published it when he was, like, 14 or 15. Like, the first book is rough. It is
it?
basically... I mean, he has, like... It's basically Star Wars in fantasy. I mean, it's literally. I mean, it's
Star
literally
Wars
a kid.
with dragons.
Right, a kid wrote it, and there's characters in there that you're like, oh, dude, really? He just like reversed letters, and anyway, the series gets a little better, but yeah, the first book is rough because a kid wrote it, and it has the markings of immaturity on it. So that's what I've heard about Frankenstein. Like, she's 19. Wasn't she 19?
I don't know. I don't know how old she was when she wrote Frankenstein. I don't remember.
Okay, I've heard she was young, and it kind of comes through, but I guess we will find out.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. I find it delightful to read.
Delightful. Okay, I'm just like picturing like
death and body parts.
Gene Wilder's Young Frankenstein. So I mean, that would be delightful if that was. But
Igor.
Yeah. All right. So our next book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'll put in the show notes. You can look down below the reading assignment for next time, and we'll go from there. All right. Woo. So until next time, we are Classics You Slept Through. So please follow us on social media. We are at CYST Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can send us an email with your thoughts. Those emails are rolling in. We've got 2 and 2 years now from non-family members. So
and non-best friends.
Yeah, exactly. It's starting to pick up now. So our email address is cystpod@gmail.com. You can also find us. All of these discussion episodes and our readings are on YouTube as well. So search for us. Classics You Slept Through on YouTube, or again, you can just hit the show notes. Everything's down there in the show notes. So until next time, spring break is just around the corner, and Fort Lauderdale is kind of cliche for spring break. So, why don't you think about Fort Wayne, Indiana, or Fort Scott, Kansas? How about Fort Morgan, Colorado? Or you could even go to Fort Portal in Uganda. That sounds like an interesting one, if you ask me.
Fort McHenry shout out?
Well, I can list every fort you can visit, but you can Fort McHenry, star-shaped thing.
Or where you're less
action.
likely to get COVID or shot.
If you're
Florida.
outside, I suppose. Anyway.
That's it.
That's it. I said the thing.
Peace.